Hello, I've been playing a bit of Arma 3 lately, and although I did play through most of the tutorial where you play as an infantry soldier down in the dirt, moving his legs and huffing and puffing up and down hills and stuff, that's not really why I got this game. I mainly got it because it has a pretty good flight simulator section to it where you can fly planes and helicopters, but it's not a full-on flight simulator that makes you twiddle around with hundreds of dials and knobs and switches just to get something flying. You can pretty much get away with just pitch, roll, throttle, and rudder, and maybe landing gear if you want to. I guess you don't even need to bother with the landing gear, really. But it's not an arcade game either, so it has some elements of aerodynamics simulated. So it's about the level of realism that I wanted to, play. And I also really enjoy that it has a very, very rich ground to it. So you're not just flying over a flat polygon with some picture on it. There are lots and lots of 3D models, lots and lots of vegetation, buildings, roads, hills, trees, cars. Actually there's no cars in what I'm going to show you, but there's lots and lots of detail. So to get my radio control transmitter hooked up to the computer to do this, I've used something called UnoJoy, which lets you use an Arduino Uno or an Arduino Mega, and there's a couple of other things that you can use as well, but I've used an Uno for this one. And I've covered this in a video in the past, so I'll put a link to that in the description. There's quite a bit of setup involved, not particularly difficult. The most important thing is to make sure that you have a genuine Arduino Uno, not one of these knockoffs that has a CH340 serial, a USB to serial adapter, which won't let you do this stuff, because the Arduino has to masquerade as a USB input device for the computer. So I'll refer you to that video for all the details of that. But in this video, I thought I might look at how you can set that up with Arma specifically and do some input mapping, and then we'll do a little bit of flying and have fun after that. I'll also put a link in the description to the sketch that I'm using for this. So you put the sketch on the Arduino normally before you convert it to be a USB input device. And this is going to let you use 6 channels of PPM input. So you have to make your receiver output PPM for if you want to use this sketch. So in order to do the flight simulator parts of the game, you'll need to get the game itself, obviously, which is about $40 US, I think. The easiest place to get it is on Steam, as far as I know. And you'll also need to get some downloadable content, these DLC extras here, for helicopters and jets, or whichever one you want, I suppose. And these are about $10 each, so it starts to add up. And one of the maps, or actually the map that I will be playing a little bit later in this video, is one of the things that made me finally get this game, because it's enormous. Just one single map, you can fly around and around it for ages, and you don't have to worry about going off the sides of the map very much because it's just so big. And it also has a lot more trees and vegetation and towns and roads and buildings, and it's just a much more interesting looking map. And that's called the Tanoa map, and that is in this Apex, I think it's in this Apex package here, which is about $25 or something like that. Otherwise you're stuck with some of these other maps that are a little bit more deserty looking, which personally I don't find them that interesting to fly around. So you'll need those, and you'll also need a pretty decent computer to run it. My computer was, I think, a pretty decent computer about 4 or 5 years ago, not these days, but it's still running it okay. And considering that it's also recording and compressing this video while it's doing it, it manages alright. So I'll put the specs to my computer in the description box below if you want to see what I'm using to run it on. By the way, to get an idea of how much bigger the Tanoa map is from some of the other ones, this is airstrip here, and you can see that that's the full level. This one is a bit bigger, I think that's an airstrip there, and this one is an airstrip there. But the Tanoa map, you actually have multiple airstrips, so there's one there, there's one there, there's one there, I think there's another one somewhere else as well. So you can take off from one airfield and land at another one, which is kind of fun. To set up the input mapping for the controller is actually fairly easy. From the main menu, if you go to Controls, and then just check on Controller here that you have your UnoJoy joystick showing up. I don't think you need to do anything on the screen, so I'm just going to click OK and go back. And now there are many different modes of movement, so you can be a soldier walking around, or you can be somebody driving a car or flying a plane, whatever. So up here we need to select a subset of the commands, and I'm going to look at helicopter movement, So now we have specific stuff for helicopters, so cyclic forward, backward, etc. And the way that we make a setting for one of these is just by clicking on it and then inputting the control that you want to do. So cyclic forward for me is going to be that. Oh, let me turn my radio on first. There we go. Now when you get a bunch of stuff in here like this, you can delete them. It detected something happening when I turned the radio on there, so you can just delete them like that. So let me try again. Cyclic forward should be that. So don't really bother yourself with what these names are. It's just whatever it detects, it should detect it correctly. So cyclic backward will be that. Cyclic left will be this. Cyclic right will be that. And then we have collective, which is the throttle. Well, kind of like the throttle. And if you're using a controller that just has buttons for this, raise and lower, or like if you're using the keyboard, it would be those. That's what we're trying to get away from here. We want to have nicer control than that. So if you look down here, this is another thing that I was pleased to see, because it makes the whole experience of using the throttle much, much better. We have an analog raise and lower, and if I click on here, I want to raise the throttle, so it should detect 1, and then to lower it, it's going to be the other direction. I think that's how that works. So 1 should be plus and 1 should be minus, like that. The other thing that we can do, not so important for a helicopter, but for a plane, we'll also want to raise and lower the landing gear and fiddle around with the flaps as well. So we have gear down and gear up, and unfortunately you can't make it so that it detects a button position as one of those things. So ideally we'd want to have it that's, say, gear down, that's gear up or whatever. But the only way you can do it is by pushing a button. So you can map the same input. Oh, I've already done this one because I did it. I have my plane set up already, and it looks like it copies the gear down, gear up settings from plane to helicopter for you. But basically I would do it like this. By the way, if you do an input twice on this screen, it will either add it or delete it for you. So that's what I want to be gear down. So I do OK there. And you'll notice I have the same thing for gear up. So what that means is that to raise the landing gear I have to go like that, and then to lower the landing gear I've got to put the button back up and then back down and then back up again. So you can think of the switch as pressing a button down and holding it down. So when the switch goes back up, it's like you're letting go of the button. So it's a little bit awkward, but that's the way I've set it up, and yeah, it seems to work all right for me. And if we look at plane movement, I've already set up the plane stuff. There's just one other thing that we can use, flaps down and flaps up. And I found that this didn't work too well, because when you actually get into the game, you'll find that the planes have 2 levels of flaps. So there's like takeoff flaps and landing flaps levels or something like that. And if you use the normal mouse scroll method to change the flaps, you can do flaps down twice in a row, and that will put them all the way down. And then if you do flaps up twice in a row, that'll get it so that the flaps are completely off, or not using flaps. But you can't do that with this, because when you're just pushing the same button all the time, it doesn't know whether you want to go down twice or up twice, or just down once and then up once again. So I found that all that this lets you do is put the flaps down, and then no matter what you do afterwards, I put my flaps on this switch here, no matter what you do afterwards, the flaps just stay down in the middle position, like takeoff flaps position. Yeah, so that could be, not sure how to get around it with this simple 6-channel system that I'm using here, but just thought I'd mention that. Anyway, so when you've got all that ready, should be okay to control the plane. So the quickest way to just jump in and start flying something is to use this editor, which lets you select a map and then place down vehicles and units and just start using them straight away. There is, of course, a full single-player campaign and online multiplayer and all that kind of stuff, but I found that when you are doing that stuff, at least the campaign, it makes you follow a scripted sequence of events where you have to do this and that and go and see this person and then do something else. And then when you take off and you're flying around, you're supposed to go to a certain place and do something, otherwise your mission gets aborted and you have to do it again. And then when you get up in the air, there's people trying to shoot you down and all that kind of nuisancey stuff. So what I usually do is just come in here and select a map, that one usually, and it loads up pretty quickly, and it will place you somewhere or other on the map, and you can look around by using the right mouse button and the mouse, and you can use the WASD keys to move horizontally, and you can use the scroll wheel to zoom out. Looks, there's a town over there. There's an incredible amount of detail here. It's so, like, look at this pile of rubbish. What else have we got? Anything interesting over here? I know it's all instant stuff, but still, the fact that there's this much level of detail, for me, makes it much more enjoyable as a flight simulator, just to have something to look at on the ground that's actually not just a flat textured polygon like a lot of the flight simulators are, or were in the past. At least I haven't looked at them too much recently, but this, just this level of detail, and all these buildings, a lot of these buildings you can go into, and these doors all work, and you can go up and down the stairs and use the ladders and stuff like that. Anyway, it's a great game. But if you zoom out, you'll see that we are, I'm not sure where we are, but you can go to wherever you want by pressing M, and then again use the mouse wheel and the right mouse button to move it around, and then you can pick this camera up and move it around like that to wherever you want to go. In fact, this whole island I've never been to, by the way, and I've played this quite a bit. That's how big this game is. But I've been practicing over here, so I know a little bit of the landmarks in the area, which is very useful when it comes to lining up an approach for a plane. So I'm just going to start there and go down here, and I'm going to put a helicopter down there. So we do that by selecting helicopter. This is the one I've been practicing with, and plop that there, and I'll come back and fly a plane after that, I think. So let me put this A10 Warthog down. Oh, sorry, I mean A164 Wipeout. It's going to go here, and if you want to place this somewhere like there and line it up, you can use Shift and left mouse button to rotate it to face down the runway or something like that. And then you can right click on these and play as the character. So if you are familiar with flying a mini quad in rate mode, you shouldn't have too much difficulty getting a hang of the basics of this, but there are quite a few things that are a little bit different that do need some getting used to. The main one is that there's a lot of momentum feeling, so your inputs will take effect immediately, but the effect of your inputs will sort of linger around for longer. So you just have to do everything a little bit ahead of time, I guess is one way to put it. And the other thing is that the rudder behavior is quite different at speed than it is to when you're just hovering with no airspeed or low airspeed. So if we just take off here, whoops. Watch what happens when I do full right rudder. We spin around about that quickly, full left rudder. So we can spin about that quickly in yaw when we're not moving at high speed, but when we get a bit of airspeed up, I'll just fly down this runway as best I can. Straighten up there, mostly. Alright, whatever. Now, watch what happens when I do full right rudder here. It just swings a little bit to one side and then stops. That's full left rudder there. And I think the reason for that is that it's simulating to some extent the effects of aerodynamics on the body of the quad, I mean helicopter, because the tail of it will act a little bit like a wind vane, so that the tail of the helicopter can't go too much to the side when the wind is rushing past it. And there's quite a pronounced effect between, pronounced difference between these two modes. So let me do full left rudder, nothing much happens. But if I slow right down, when I get to about 40 kilometers per hour, you'll see that the effect of the rudder suddenly comes back, and I can swing around real quick, so I have to sort of quickly let off the rudder a bit so I don't go swinging around like crazy. What is that down there? Bunch of stuff sitting on the pier. And that kind of pissed me off a little bit, that rudder effect, until I figured out what was going on. And once you figure out the logic behind it and realize that it's something that you can predict a bit better, I guess, and work with, then it's not so much of an issue. Let's see if we can get under here without crashing. There we go. And there's a similar effect that happens with pitch. We need to get some airspeed again. So let's just see if we can get up to about 180 or so. Got to climb over this hill though. So notice I have to keep pitch pushed forward in order just to maintain level flight. Here we go. So if I let go of the pitch stick, well, if you're flying a mini quad with your pitch stick pushed forward the whole time, you'd roll over forwards and crash, right? Just let off the throttle a little. Okay, now let me let go of pitch, and you'll see it rock back a bit. And I think that's also because of the aerodynamic effect of the tail, so it's pushing the tail down. So the other effect that I wanted to show you was, got to get airspeed again. When you cut the throttle, it's actually the collective, so it's not really the throttle because the blades keep spinning at the same speed. They're just spinning flat to the body of the helicopter. So what you can do here is when you get a good bit of airspeed, you can just cut the throttle completely, like that. And as long as you're not pitching down too much, you can actually glide as if the rotor of the helicopter was a wing. So notice that we haven't lost a whole lot of altitude there. But when we get to about 100 kilometers an hour, you lose that wing, that glide sort of effect. So right about here I'll bring my throttle back on just to be safe. So that is also obviously something that you cannot do with your mini quad or any quad. You'll just drop out of the sky. But I thought it's quite interesting that you can simulate all that kind of thing in this game. So it's just to my liking. There's a little bit of realism, but not too much. It's not a full-on flight simulator, and it's not a full-on arcade game either. Oh, there's a pole there. Let's go up a bit. Yeah, so let's see if we can land somewhere, and I'll show you a bit of this jungle that I was talking about, because if people are not familiar with this game. Hold on a minute. Okay, so to slow down, I'm going to cut the throttle to almost nothing, pull back on pitch, and I'm still got a lot of speed. Okay, there's nothing. There's not actually a nice flat spot to land on there, I don't think. So let's not land there. But I wanted to show you how dense the jungle is if you get out and walk around. Let's see if we can land over near the top of those rocks. That looks a bit dicey too. No, that's not going to work. Oh yeah, here we go. We can land here. Just a little bit to the right, please. Okay, this should work. It's quite hard to tell when you're level. That's another thing I found that's a little bit annoying. Not sure there's any way to figure it out other than just by the way that the helicopter moves. So to get out, you use the middle mouse button, which gives you a menu in the top left, and then you can use the scroll wheel to choose one, and the middle mouse button again. So let's just jump into some jungle and we'll see just how much detail and shrubberies there are. See, look at this. Look at this tree. That's pretty amazing. And all this stuff loads in at a decent speed. It's not like super slow. Actually, this area is not as dense as I was hoping to show you, but yeah, it's all very realistic, and I think it's great. So let's go and fly that plane now. Play as character. So with the plane we will have some flaps and landing gear to play with. Actually, let me just turn the sound up because I turned the sound down for the helicopter because it's kind of loud. Continue. So use throttle and a bit of rudder to taxi, and then when we get to about here we just hit the full throttle, put my flaps down. This plane can take off pretty easily without the flaps, I think, but takes off at about 180 with the flaps. That, gear up. It's quite slow though, this one. See, we're at full throttle all the way and we only just made it to 300 kilometers an hour at this point. So it's definitely not as fast as one of the other planes that are in this game, but that's a bit hard to handle. I thought I'd just show you this one so that I didn't screw it up. Well, it's not hard to handle, it's hard to land. It's easy to fly, just hard to land. So, I don't know too much about flying full-size planes to know whether this is accurate or not, but it feels like bank and yank is not as easy as it is in an RC plane. See, I'm yanking and I guess that's how it works, isn't it? I don't know, it just sort of feels like you don't get as much of a turn as I would expect from a bank and yank. See, that's full pitch back. I guess it's alright. But I've quite often found myself using the rudder a lot actually to help the turn go through like this. Starting to get a bit lost here. Just try and figure out where I am. You can use the map at any time, but it doesn't pause, so you've just got to be careful with it. I think I know where I am now. Yep. It's good, so I'm just going to go back and land the same place that I took off from. And for this one you've got to land at not too much more than 200 kilometers an hour or so. Otherwise you shoot off the end of the runway. We're going really fast here, let's slow down. Okay, and we're approaching way too quickly, but hopefully I can just keep the zero throttle like this and we'll be okay. And if I turn landing gear on here, we'll see that we get a heads up display of the airstrip, which is very handy. Still going too fast, so I'm going to have to air brake, pitch down a bit. 295 is alright, still just gliding. 270, not bad, a little bit fast, pitch up a little, roll. Okay, more air brake. Okay, not bad. And then I've got to hold this brake. I'm using the X key on the keyboard to brake. Helps to slow down. Brakes help to slow down. Did you know that? And let's just taxi this back to where we came from. By the way, that helicopter flight model that we were talking about before is actually a simplified one. If you want to, you can set it to a more complicated one. Where is it? Game. There you go. Standard. Advanced. So you've got all these things on here that you can modify if you should want to. I tried it and it's really difficult, so I'm just sticking with standard, which has enough realism for me with that, you know, the rudder effect and everything that keeps me happy. So anyway, I think this video is long enough now. Hope it was interesting. Thanks for watching.